Well, good evening. I hope you had a good day. I'm Granny Goodday, and you can call me Gigi for short. And thanks for letting me read you a bedtime story this evening. And so you go ahead and get yourself comfortable, get in bed, relax, and tonight we are going to read, it's a little book, but it's got a lot in there. It's called Mr. Happy, and I think it'll be a great bedtime story. So just sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy the story. So this is Mr. Happy by Roger Hargreaves. I want to put that up there just in case I did not pronounce his name right. Pretty excited to hear about Mr. Happy. On the other side of the world, where the sun shines hotter than here, and where the trees are 100 feet tall, there is a country called Happy Land. As you might very well expect, everybody who lives in Happy Land is as happy as the day is long. Wherever you go, you see smiling faces all around. It's such a happy place that even the flowers seem to smile in Happy Land. All the animals in Happy Land are happy as well. If you've never seen a smiling mouse, or a happy cat, or a dog, or even a smiling worm, go to Happy Land. Look at that smiling worm. This is a story about someone who lived in Happy Land, who happened to be called Mr. Happy. Mr. Happy was fat and round and happy. There he is. Looks pretty happy. He lived in a small cottage beside a lake, at the foot of a mountain, and close to the woods. One day, while Mr. Happy was walking in those woods near his home, he came across something which was really very exciting. There in the trunk of one of the very tall trees was a door. Not a very large door, but it was certainly a door. A small, narrow, yellow door. Definitely a door. I wonder who lives here, thought Mr. Happy. And he turned the handle of that small, narrow, yellow door. The door wasn't locked, and it swung open quite easily. Just inside the small, narrow, yellow door was a small, narrow, winding staircase leading down. Mr. Happy squeezed his rather large body through the rather thin doorway and began to walk down the stairs. The stairs went round and round and down and down and round and down and down and round. There he is. I wonder where he's going to. Finally, after a long time, Mr. Happy reached the bottom of the staircase. He looked around and saw in front of him another small, narrow door. But this one was red. Do you think Mr. Happy is curious? I'm curious. Mr. Happy knocked on the door. "Who's there?" said a voice. It was a sad, squeaky sort of voice. "Who's there?" Mr. Happy slowly pushed open the red door. There, sitting on a stool, was somebody who looked exactly like Mr. Happy, except that he didn't look happy at all. In fact, he looked downright miserable. Aww. "Hello," said Mr. Happy. "I'm Mr. Happy." "Oh, are you really?" sniffed the person who looked like Mr. Happy but wasn't. "Well, my name is Mr. Miserable, and I'm the most miserable person in the world." "Why are you so miserable?" asked Mr. Happy. "Because I am," replied Mr. Miserable. They do look a lot alike. "How would you like to be happy like me?" asked Mr. Happy. "I'd give anything to be happy," said Mr. Miserable. "But I'm so miserable. I don't think I could ever be happy," he said miserably. Mr. Happy made up his mind quickly. "Follow me," he said. "Where to?" asked Mr. Miserable. "Don't argue," said Mr. Happy, and he went out through the small, narrow red door. Oh, here they are outside. Mr. Miserable hesitated and then followed. Up and up the winding staircase they went, up and around and around and up and around and round and up until they came out into the woods. "Follow me," said Mr. Happy again, and they both walked through the woods back to Mr. Happy's cottage. Mr. Miserable stayed in Mr. Happy's cottage for quite a while, and during that time, the most remarkable thing happened. Because he was living in Happy Land, Mr. Miserable very, very slowly stopped being miserable and started to be happy. His mouth stopped turning down at the corners. I think there's hope for him. Can't turn the pages. There we go. And very, very slowly, it started turning up at the corners. And eventually, Mr. Miserable did something that he had never done in his whole life. What's that starting to look like? He smiled, and then he chuckled, which turned into a giggle, which became a laugh. A big, booming, hearty, huge, giant, large, enormous laugh. And Mr. Happy was so surprised that he started to laugh as well. And both of them laughed and laughed. They laughed until their sides hurt and their eyes watered. Mr. Miserable and Mr. Happy laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. Oh my gosh, that sounds like so much fun. Look at him. They went outside and still they laughed. And because they were laughing so much, everybody who saw them started laughing as well. Even the birds in the trees started to laugh at the thought of somebody. Okay, that made me laugh too. The thought of somebody called Mr. Miserable who just couldn't stop laughing. And that's really the end of the story, except to say that if you ever feel as miserable as Mr. Miserable used to, you know exactly what to do, don't you? Just turn your mouth up at the corners and go on. Laughing is so good for the soul. And you get that good belly laugh. And I've cried before. I've fallen on the floor crying and laughing so hard. It feels so good after you've had a good laugh. So I hope you enjoy the book, Mr. Happy. And if you're still awake or you don't feel sleepy yet, go ahead and go to my page and make sure and hit subscribe so you can find me again. And I should have a lot of other bedtime stories that you can enjoy. So get you some rest, relax, and I'll see you soon. Good night.